From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined, as always, with our super producer, Dylan, the Tennessee pal, Fagan. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. If you are hearing our strange news program, the evening it publishes, let us be the first to officially welcome you to Monday, January 27th. There's so much stuff going on. Shout out to everybody who had, who was chasing the TikTok dragon and had to go into some hard withdrawal and then got it back.
It was a real roller coaster of emotions over at my house with the kids, just being like, "It's gone, everything is terrible, it's back." It's just, it was fun.
Yeah. And TikTok is obviously a huge social media platform. It was pulled voluntarily by TikTok's parent company due to the ongoing discourse between the U.S. and China. And then it was reinstated kind of the same way that Coca-Cola did New Coke and then came out with Coke Classic. And it was an entirely different recipe.
Well, Ben, I mean, you mentioned offline, the need to maybe do a deeper dive into how social media affects our attention span, but also what an important potential means of opinion manipulation and control it could be in the hands of, say, a government that was using it in that fashion.
Yeah, I'd like to shout out you, Matt, for noticing the historical precedents that may be at play.
What? You mean limiting the access people have to certain information and then controlling the information that's fed to them? Much like in the episode we just discussed, where you take a hostage, then you say, hey, you can only read these papers that we authored. Yeah.
Orwell was right. I hate to say it. Orwell was right, though, and a good writer.
For sure. And I mean, if done with enough subtlety, it could almost go unnoticed for a while, just manipulating the algorithm in just such a way to feed just enough stories that support a particular ideology or worldview. And then before you know it, kids' opinions are starting to change. I mean, and kids are smart. I'm not trying to say they're stupid, but this stuff is very difficult to combat with the whole back-to-back video binging of TikTok. You almost won't even notice that you're kind of being fed propaganda.
And social media does attack your attention span. Tune in for our episode on that. This part of the show is brought to you by Luigi Mangione and the Tiananmen Square Tourist Board.
We'll be right back with our strange news.
And we've returned. We'll call the first part of tonight's program, if I could get some Ennio Morricone music, Dylan, Pardons and Commutations.
Wah, wah, wah.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. So first off, check out our album. Secondly, we have to talk about the difference between a pardon and a commutation. Quite recently, we here in the still tenuously United States saw something extraordinary. One outgoing presidential administration released a wave of pardons and commutations. The incoming administration also launched 1,000 ships, technically more than 1,000, of pardons. And this is something that needs to be examined. Now, we know politics and ideology can be really sticky for a lot of people. We know that the American justice system has a ton of problems, but it is very important to begin with this. A pardon says you're fine, you're forgiven. A commutation says you are still guilty, but we're going to let you go.
Are there versions of commutations where it could just be like a reduced sentence, or is it always?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so.
Yeah. Commutation, think of it as a spectrum, right? And a pardon is more absolute in that regard.
Yeah. Well, and a pardon restores all of your rights as a citizen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is where we see the reason we're calling it the good, the bad, and the ugly is because depending upon your personal perspective, right, or depending upon whom you ask, some people will say a series of pardons are awesome. Other people will say a series of pardons or commutations are absolutely corrupt. One of the commutations we can begin with that we see, I believe, I hope collectively, is an absolute win is Elder Leonard Peltier has had his sentence commuted. It was commuted in what we would call an 11th hour move by the outgoing U.S. presidential administration, the Biden administration. We recently had an episode about Elder Peltier, and we actually wrote to him as well. We haven't heard back, and if you're listening, sir, we hope that you don't take the time to write us back. We hope that you enjoy your freedom. Do we want to talk a little bit about Leonard Peltier, who he is? Just a quick recap for anybody who hasn't heard the episode yet.
Sure. Yeah. And there's also a really great podcast out there called Leonard that's about his story. But he was an elder Native American tribesman who was caught up in a gunfight with the FBI, essentially. And it would seem, upon examination of the story, that he was more or less defending himself from, folks who were coming into his territory aggressively. And he was, of course, convicted for murder.
Mm. Yeah, and there was a whole, flight from the scene and, hiding out and then weapons charges and all this other stuff. It's worth your time to listen to the episode we made on it just so you can see the complexity of the issue and why maybe there are people out there who wanted him out immediately and then other people who wanted to keep him in indefinitely.
Yeah, well put there, guys. There was an executive grant of clemency signed by former President Joe Biden on January 19th. We're recording this on Wednesday, January 2nd. The commutation goes into effect on February 18th. And it seems that the administration was highlighting, underlining, italicizing, emphasizing that this was not a pardon. The former president, Joe Biden, said that Peltier is to serve the remainder of his sentence. He's granted clemency, so he's not in jail, serving the remainder of his sentence at home, and then took extensive pains to reiterate that this was not a pardon. This was not to say that he didn't do things that U.S. courts convicted him of doing. That's pretty controversial on both sides of the aisle because a lot of law enforcement entities absolutely opposed even clemency. And as we record, Leonard Peltier is 80 years old. So it's not as though he's going to be running triathlons, just to be clear.
I mean, he's certainly paid for what he was convicted of, whatever you view the reality of that situation. I mean, that's a very, very large portion of a man's life gone.
Yeah, and let's stay with the outgoing administration for a moment because, as many of us doubtlessly know, there were a lot of pardons issued in that proverbial 11th hour by the Biden administration as the Trump administration was coming into force, right? Or was coming into the White House. The list here gets controversial for some people, especially folks who are not fans of the Biden administration, because there were a lot of family pardons. There were pardons for the former president's brothers, James and Francis, as well as his sister-in-law, his brother-in-law. There were some pardons for people like Gerald Lundergrand, who was convicted in 2019 on campaign finance charges. The White House in that case said he demonstrated remorse. We don't often shout these out, this media platform out, but Newsweek, if you want to check them out, they have a pretty up-to-date list on the full Biden pardons. We also see that here's our segue, we see that his administration collectively pardoned the members and staff of the select committee investigating the events of January 6th.
Isn't that interesting? Preemptive pardons. It's so weird. Ben, did you call out the website? I didn't even know there was an office of the pardon attorney.
There is an office of the pardon attorney. Yes, that's a true story. That's a real thing.
You could go to the justice.gov website. I think it's just /pardon, and you'll get to the office of the pardon attorney, and you can see that entire list Ben is talking about. And it is fascinating to look at the giant list over the years, just as they happen with each president. Wow. That's a whole podcast series, like just examining the pardons.
Yeah, and it's also, I love that point, man, because it's also a way for us to do a kind of political dendrochronology, where you look at the rings of trees. Like, this is a great way to see the passage of time, and this is very much one of the few presidential superpowers. Right?
Yeah.
You can just pardon people at the end, like some weird super move. It's up there with an executive order. And technically, you can put out an executive order whenever you want, right? And it's the executive branch. So who's really going to fight you?
Dude, let's go back to George Bush.
From earlier.
Junior.
Yeah, George.
From earlier.
Yeah.
Let's look at all the pardons that occurred as he was exiting, just to look at,
Just to get a sense.
Yeah.
Which ones are your favorite George W. Bush pardons, you guys? We're awesome at parties.
Oh, jeez. I don't think nothing's ringing a bell right off the top.
Well, I just imagine, look, this is speculation on my part because I don't have that list and I haven't thought about it for a while.
Yeah.
But I imagine there's some preemptive pardoning of potential war criminality.
Well, who are we to say?
Hey.
And I mean, I'm sorry, this, maybe we often think of pardons as something that happens at the end of an administration as well, but these can happen anytime throughout an administration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the lists of pardons granted by President George W. Bush at justice.gov, and they go from December of 2002 all the way to January 1st, 2009, which is obviously a much longer list than the ones. No, that's not true. November 24th is a massive list. Boy, it would take a lot of doing to kind of dig into some of these.
Technically,
William Bruce Butt was pardoned for bank embezzlement in 1990.
You get in situations, like, obviously. Also, we must say that almost anybody is eligible for a pardon in the United States. Henry Lee Lucas, prolific serial killer, was spared from the death chamber by George W. Bush, at the time, a governor who commuted his death sentence. And governor's powers are not quite on the same level as the POTUS.
Holy cow, this guy, William Marcus McDonald, who's in the Air Force, under the U.S. Air Force General Court Martial. He was pardoned for distribution of cocaine, possession of cocaine with intent to distribute, use of cocaine, possession of cocaine, and use of marijuana. Want to know what that backstory is?
Small time. Or he was the plug. There's always that possibility, right? Maybe he was like, come on, man. Every time you texted me, I was there.
A lot of these are drug charges.
Yeah,
It's wild.
This poor guy, Greg Biden, he was also in the Air Force. Biden pardoned him for wrongful use of cocaine. He just used it wrong.
As opposed to the rightful use.
Right, which is clearly to make 80s bangers like, oh, Mickey, you're so fine. Clearly, cocaine was an executive producer on that one. Apologies to music. So the reason we're setting this up here is because we see that pardons, commutations, clemency, they can always be divisive. In fact, it's quite rare for these actions on the executive branch to not rub some people the wrong way, unless you're talking about clemency for clearly racially motivated stitch-ups, like civil rights activists and so on. I wanted to segue us to the other side of the pardons, because right after Biden leaves, right after the Biden administration goes out, the Donald Trump administration comes in. They return, right? LL Cool J, don't call it a comeback. and they pardon a ton of people in a way that actually pisses off some Republicans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone in particular, Ben, that you're thinking of?
Well, for the most interesting purpose on our show here, Noel, I would say one thing that stood out to us was the pardon of the creator of the Silk Road 2.0, the creator of the dark web market, the Silk Road, which a lot of people used to buy their drugs, and I guess to the earlier point, hopefully they were using them the right way. This is a guy named Ross Ulbricht. And Ross Ulbricht, we were talking about this offline, and we received some messages from some of our fellow conspiracy realists about this. We have previous episodes on this. He was convicted in 2015 in New York, a state here in the U.S., in case anybody needs to be caught up on or read up on that.
Accurate.
Yeah. All true. He was convicted for distribution of narcotics, for conspiracies related to money laundering. He was sentenced to life in prison, which was, as we noted previously in 2015, fairly unusual, like the severity of his sentence as a first-time offender, et cetera, et cetera. It really seemed to be a matter of, you could say, setting an example, or a matter of people saying, hey, we're aware of cybercrime, and we're not just some stodgy old, I'm almost quoting Philip Larkin, we're not some stodgy old fools in hats and coats. We understand.
Speaking of stodgy old fools, and no offense, guys, or to myself, but 10 years ago, approximately, we talked with Alex Winter about his documentary Deep Web about Ross Ulbricht and the Silk Road and everything that was happening then. And it was basically, we need some justice for this guy, and feel how you feel about the Silk Road and Bitcoin and all of that stuff that was happening. But this guy kind of he was made into an example, just as you said.
Yeah, agreed. And great shout out to our pal Alex. Alex Winter is a phenomenal documentarian. One of our favorite behind the scenes moments there, I can't believe a decade ago, was...
Well, and if you don't know the name Alex Winter, you might know Bill S. Preston Esquire.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, had some adventures. They were pretty excellent.
Wild stallions.
So he went on to become a phenomenal documentarian and a very kind, quite accomplished individual. My favorite behind the scenes moment, again, a decade ago, was during the interview. This guy's so erudite. He's so smart. He pauses for a second. We hear a beep in the background, and he goes, "Oh yeah, guys, hold on, off air. My hot pockets are done."
That's right.
I thought it was amazing.
What a mensch.
Yeah. So this has been, for proponents of Ulbricht, this has been a long time in coming. And one of the many pardons or moves toward clemency granted by the incoming Trump administration was the pardon of Ross Ulbricht. And this, please check out our interview with Alex. Please check out our earlier conversations about this. And also shout out to everybody who wrote in about the Dread Pirate Roberts, because that is the alias Ulbricht used when he was running this. So that
Can I do one more shout out?
Oh, please do.
Shout out to Dastardly Dan, consummate voicemailer on the show. And he hipped us to an album called Freedom by Akira the Dawn.
Yes.
That features it's basically a bunch of phone calls Ross made from prison, I guess, to, Akira or somebody associated with Akira. Then Akira the Dawn put that to music, and it's an entire 35-minute album of that, and it's brilliant.
Superb. Yeah. And thank you, Dastardly Dan. Thank you, Akira the Dawn. It reminds me, we were saving this for on air. It reminds me of, for any hip hop heads, the recordings you will hear from Mumia Abu Jamal, most notably perhaps for backpacker nerds like us, most notably featured on several tracks by Immortal Technique. Immortal Technique is not for everybody, but do check it out. We're just going to lead you to the edge of that rabbit hole. Go ahead and dive in. I would
know those artists that you adore, but you feel like they would probably hate your guts. I think that's the way I feel about Immortal Technique.
True story. They buried the hatchet. I hate pop culture talk, but I respect both these guys. He buried the hatchet with Lin-Manuel Miranda because Lin-Manuel Miranda, the creator of Hamilton, said that Immortal Technique used to bully him when they were in school.
Literally said he used to shove him in a trash can.
Yeah,
Jeez,
right.
Look, I hate to say it. Immortal, I can see it, man.
Oh no!
I mean,
Big bully energy.
But he's incredible and prolific and says stuff that makes your mind go, "Oh, I understand now."
Check out his statements on the Fourth Estate, right?
Yeah,
Oh gosh, F the Middle East and gave birth to a demon. Oh my. Oh, right. Okay.
Yep.
Moving on. Do check out Immortal Technique. Again, not for everybody, but a prominent activist, and I would say often endeavors to speak truth to power. And that is what supporters of the incoming administration feel that the current POTUS has done with his more controversial pardons. The Trump administration, or Trump administration version 2, I guess, new Trump or Trump classic, whatever you want to call it, has officially pardoned a ton of people who were in trouble for attending the January 6th events not too long ago. And I remember when we all learned the news like everybody else, and we got in our little nerd studio and we were recording when we didn't know what was going to happen to Washington, D.C. Do you guys remember that moment?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I wish, folks, I wish you could see my guy's eyes right now because we all just got that 7-league stare and went, yeah. It was one of those moments that happens often to us where we say, okay, this is crazy, but let's do our little podcast. and hope we leave the booth to find the same country that was there when we walked in. These pardons that are official, it's almost 1,600 people, all of whom were charged with the criminal activity during the riot on January 6th in 2021. Of those charged, about 1,270 had been convicted and about 1,100 had already been sentenced. And the current U.S. president said these are hostages.
Patriots.
Full pardon. Right, hostages and patriots.
Do you guys, I mean, already before this, I was sort of thinking, and I think I have in the past maybe even mentioned it, how pardons in general have this sense to me of like eroding the legal system, eroding trust in the law. And when they become incredibly political, like the one that you're talking about, Ben, it just pushes that even further. I mean, just looking at this list of George W. Bush pardons, so many of them, and again, not without knowing the full backstory behind them, are things like heroin trafficking,
sure.
The mega felonies, bank crimes, all of this kind of stuff. It just seems like with the wave of a hand, it almost imparts the kind of infinite godlike wisdom on a president that a king would have.
Right, compromising rule of law.
That's right. It just doesn't seem right to me when it's just unilaterally able to be done, especially in a case like this that so directly had an impact on the image of this president. He's kind of tweaking the narrative in his favor in an interesting way.
I don't disagree with you. I think the perspective I've got on it right now is that we've talked about how imperfect our justice system is, right? And how many times somebody gets caught up in it and is either wrongfully convicted or the system messes up, right? So it's cool to have that kind of emergency lever that if you make a good enough case or a set of attorneys makes a good enough case, a president can just say, all right, that was a screw up, let's fix that. But you're absolutely right that they can do that with their family members or somebody who did them a solid back in the 70s.
Right. Yeah. And for anybody listening, well said, anybody listening outside of the United States, most people don't get preemptive pardons. It would be kind of dope to have one. I'm just going to be super honest with all of us together tonight. There's much more to get to. We're running at time a little bit. I think the most important point I wanted to make here, the reason we're talking about this is not because we ourselves have any sort of political horse in the race, like everybody else. We in this country, we live here. We want things to go well. We're fans of democracy. You know what I mean? So for us, the institutional power of a pardon or clemency is a very fascinating process. It's a weird power to have, and at times it's definitely a necessary power to wield. But just like perhaps owning a gun or waving a machete, the power itself has no moral compulsion. It's really up to the person who is wielding the weapon. Yep, that was for
Matt's
you, man.
Literally wielding a machete right now.
It's a good one,
Gave
too.
me.
Cold pressed.
It's a badass machete.
But I mean, I think whatever your political persuasion is, I would think that the actions of some of those Jan 6th rioters would be abhorrent to you. If you do believe in the system that we have in this democracy, it just seems like that's just not really how these things are supposed to be done. You're supposed to exercise your power with your vote and with civic engagement, not with storming a government building and holding political appointees and elected officials hostage, more or less, and using a reign of terror. But then I guess people in support of it could say it's a revolution. So that's the tricky part, right?
Right, because this country was founded on a conspiracy. Imperfect
exactly
as
right.
it was, that is the native language, I would argue, of the American experiment. And that's what I want to point out here. And I love the setup there, Noel. To continue what we're saying, we're talking about this because opponents on either side of any of these pardons or these moves for clemency, they see it as conspiracy. Now, several of the people involved in the January 6th events were convicted of seditious conspiracy, which is as hardcore as it sounds. It's like it's not, forgetting to wear a seatbelt. It's the bad stuff. And so this
overthrow, right?
Right. Sedition. This brings us to a moment, and we're all here together in this moment, and we want to hear from you. We'd also love I'd love for people to check out what's going on in the Republic of Korea or South Korea right now. You think January 6th was something here? Check out the events in Korea quite recently, which we briefly alluded to. But yeah, give us your opinions. Write to us, call us. We'll tell you how to get in touch at the end. Let us know if you ever got a preemptive pardon and what that lets you do. Like if you get a preemptive pardon, we should do an episode on diplomatic immunity and preemptive pardons, because I love the idea that if you're consular or diplomatic staff for the right country, you basically never pay for parking tickets in the United States. That's a weird specific superpower.
And you get a cool, what is it called? Like a pouch?
You get the diplomatic pouches.
That's it. Yeah.
Until North Korea ruined it for everybody.
Oh, man.
Guys,
and this is literally just like a briefcase that is not allowed to be searched, more or less?
Yeah. Because all the people in power, in state power, collectively said, let's keep our secrets. And then North Korea used it to smuggle hard drugs.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Bad on you, North Korea. That's really crazy considering how hard they are on drug use and drug trafficking. A friend of mine actually just got detained coming out of Korea because he had a weed vape on him. And he was basically in Korean weed jail for 3 days and was only released right after the president was impeached. I don't know.
Whoa.
I was going to ask you guys, do you think that's sort of a clearing the air kind of thing where like things are tenuous? Let's maybe let some of these potential political prisoners go, because they can be used that way. You know what I mean? We've seen it before.
Shout out to Dennis Rodman, or tip of the cap to Dennis, tip of the machete. I'll keep it brief, and I don't want to talk too much about this on air, but for anybody who's been in a dicey situation, you are correct, Noel. There are often larger mechanics at play, and people can be used as leverage. The big takeaway, since we're a family show, is if you are going to a country that tells you not to take certain things there,
don't do it.
Just beat me here, Dylan. Just believe them.
Be cool, man.
Don't think you can roll for charisma on that one. So again, I know I've run a little long here. I really appreciate this. And folks, we are, again, cannot emphasize this enough. We are here with you. We don't have any insider info on what happens next. We know that a lot of people are extremely sensitive to what's going on now. A lot of people feel that their existence is threatened. A lot of people feel that there is some great reckoning afoot, right? And we're not here to pretend democracy is perfect. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways. The number one is that we want to hear from you.
And, and we care about all of you, all of our conspiracy realists, all of our wonderful listeners. And we're not here to force anything down your throat or tell you what to believe or tell you how to feel. We're just trying to navigate this world and this political climate with empathy and open-mindedness and doing the best we can, just like everybody else.
So well said. So again, I just want to emphasize and end with this. Tell us what you believe the conspiracies may be. We are here with you. We are grateful for your time. We're going to pause for a word from our sponsors, and then we'll return. And I'm just going to go to justice.gov real quick and check out if I got pardoned too.
And we have returned with another piece of strange news. This one's been brewing for a hot minute, and I'm really excited to talk about this with both of you. But Matt, maybe you specifically, because of your, I would argue, slightly above average gamer status. Ben, I think you're up there too, certainly. I would consider myself a fair weather gamer at best. I enjoy playing video games. I am not particularly great at any of them. I do sometimes get flummoxed with games like Elden Ring. I never finished that because it just got a little too hard for me, and I just didn't have time to get good. Maybe I'll pick it back up again. But here's the thing. I own my fair weather gamer status. I would never deign to attempt to compete in any kind of elite circles or, leaderboards or anything like that. And that's something that's very important to a lot of people in the gaming community, obviously, with Twitch streaming, and it's incredibly competitive, and stats are so trackable. And, there are people that really want to be on top, but to be on top in any of these like elite games, like Diablo 4, for example, or things like Elden Ring, a game called Path of Exile 2, it takes a lot of effort, of grinding, of sleepless nights, of energy drinks to even crack the top 100 in games like this. And someone who has made no secrets about what they describe as their, in so many words, elite gamer status is Elon Musk. And he has long been a fan of video games as far back as, I believe, Quake, some of the early id Software games. He was one of these, he's even described in gamer communities as being an OG player in some of those early kind of online shooter games that sort of laid the groundwork for some of these way, way more elaborately trackable and competitive kind of massive online games. And the controversy around Elon Musk is not limited to gaming, of course, but I just think this is a fun little microcosm of some of the larger controversy surrounding him, which maybe is something surrounding his credibility. Is this a person that is honest? Is this a person that is telling the truth about their ideas, their provenance of their ideas? We know he's got a history of kind of taking credit for other people's ideas as far back as PayPal and also with Tesla. He fought really, really hard to be considered, I believe, a co-creator of Tesla. But the reality seems to be that he co-opted that brand by purchasing it and then tried to kind of pass off some of those ideas as his own. Well, it seems like the blinders are off, or the veil has been lifted on Elon's elite gaming status. And this is where I hope you guys can maybe help me make sense of some of this stuff. As recently as December of 2024, I don't remember the exact, I think there was a video that was published, a stream of him playing this game, Path of Exile 2, on the 17th of December. Some kind of eagle-eyed viewers of the stream noticed there were a few things that were a little suspicious about Elon's gaming activity, especially for someone that I believe was level 96, which I think is pretty insanely high.
That's grind time for sure.
Well, it's my understanding that once you get past a certain point of leveling up in that game, as is the case in games like Elden Ring, you have to collect so much more XP to get to the next level. Each level beyond that becomes exponentially harder to crack.
And a lot of games that have a long end game, like a long path to an end game, will institute other things where your level gets capped, but then there's all kinds of other perks that get unlocked each time you quote level and stuff. And it becomes extremely, as you said, time consuming to do that stuff. And I think that's maybe the most important thing to this story, the time it takes to get specific gear or to, level up enough times. Yeah,
it's like long division or good editing. There's not really a shortcut to it. You know what I mean? And that's the question, because I love that we're bringing this up, Noel. I remember distinctly looking at this and thinking, even as a guy who's never played Path of Exile 2 or whatever, I remember thinking, how does he find the time? And I wasn't trying to be a jerk with that question. I was thinking of, the 24 hours that people have in a day. Right. And the amount required for, sleep or like pooping or eating or, the basics.
In like our podcast world, we end up tied up with more meetings than we would like just in the course of a day.
You don't like the meetings?
Well,
I love the meetings.
Results may vary, but we don't run 3 of the world's top technology companies, that with shareholders. And I can't imagine the amount of stuff that someone like Elon Musk gets pulled into. And to do the amount of gameplay that would be required to crack this level, I believe he claims he has the number 59 hardcore character, is named Kekius Maximus. And he also has several other hardcore characters who have died. This is a game mode, by the way, that is permanent death. Matt, can you explain that a little bit, maybe?
Permanent death? You talking about hardcore characters? Like
that's right.
Gone?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that means the character is toast. Period. What you've built, what you've put into it, it's all gone if you die.
Yes. Yeah. It's the big old gamble for somebody who really likes to gamble with their life, literally their life.
And some games would not allow you to opt out of it. I don't know if you guys ever played the Captain Planet game.
Oh, geez.
No. It was famously, it was set to permadeath. Like it was
harder than Echo the Dolphin?
Harder than and uglier than.
Yeah. Echo the Dolphin was pretty, but boy, that was a slog. Some of the things that some of these eagle-eyed viewers of the stream noticed were things like this. He didn't seem to know. This is all collected, by the way, in a great post on Reddit documenting the saga of Elon Musk's account.
Or Adrian Dittman. That's another guy we should mention.
Isn't that his alter ego?
Yeah, I'm walking down the street to
where he's like kind of defends himself from this ghost account.
Yeah, it's kind of like when certain politicians would call radio shows and pretend to be someone different and talk about how great they are.
Well, we had an instance of Adrian Dittman defending something that Elon posted on X, and he kind of was so frustrated, I think, that he forgot to change his voice.
Yes.
That happened recently. That's not in the gaming realm, but definitely.
I'm just asking.
It's about the credibility, Ben. You're 100% correct. It is about the credibility, and we're going to get further into this. So one thing that was noticed was that he doesn't seem to know how to use a mana flask when out of mana, that he struggled with it for like over 10 seconds, just like clicking around or whatever. He doesn't seem to understand that you can only run connected Atlas nodes. These are maps in the game. I believe in Path of Exile 1, they were called maps, but in the second one, they're actually called waystones or something like that. And they have to, I don't know exactly how the game mechanic works, but they have to be connected in order to access them. And so the characters that he's playing and demonstrating are at levels that would imply that he had run hundreds, if not thousands of these Atlas nodes. So clicking around kind of dumbfoundedly as he did in this stream is a bit of a red flag. You guys might understand why this is a red flag. He picks up items by dragging them into his inventory manually. I imagine there's a shortcut that more seasoned gamers would use, especially if you're playing on a PC, some sort of hotkey or a shift click or something like that. But apparently he's just clicking and dragging them into his inventory. He seemingly struggles to understand why he cannot pick up an item when his inventory is full. I mean, I'm an absolute fair weather gamer. I know stuff like that. I was just telling you guys, like a game like Baldur's Gate seems a little above my pay grade, and these top-down kind of games like this, more D&D based, I find a little bit confounding, but I understand that mechanic. He had this comment where there were like, I guess for, on certain items, I guess there are I guess, buffs that you can install. You've got like slots for them, maybe on a sword, like for certain stones, maybe that give it special powers. Apparently on certain maps, it's got these slots for ways of buffing it in some way, but he referred to them as the 4 things, map things, as opposed to like what they actually are, which is something like what I would do. He's always making comments about how his gear isn't good because it's low level, but what he doesn't seem to realize that most of the, hardcore players of this game know is that a low level item or a low required level item can be better than a legendary piece of gear. Oftentimes you just have to know and you have to use it in practice. So when he's making these comments about, it's only level 65, etc., he seems to not understand the difference between item level and required level. I'll just give you one more, and then we can kind of move on to the twist in the story. The account he is on puts their maps in a tab called Elon's Maps. So there's an implication here that this is a shared account, which is what is in question here. There's this thing called account boosting, or basically you pay someone to run your account for you because the level of his character, the type of elite gear that he has would require thousands and thousands of hours of play. And to your point, Ben, where does he find the time? Recently, an article came out where due to a leaked, I guess, or published screenshot of some DMs between Zach Asmongold Hoyt and Elon Musk, he has essentially admitted to doing just that, to paying to have his account boosted. This revelation came, by the way, this is a great article from Kotaku by Ethan Gatch. I'm just going to quote from him here for a second. That revelation came in DMs he seemingly exchanged with YouTuber, my mistake, it was Nico Rex, which is another gaming YouTuber, and which were subsequently shared in a video published on January 18th titled Addressing All the Elon Musk Drama in PoE 2 with Elon Musk. Apparently he was given permission to publish these screenshots. During the conversations, the Tesla CEO admitted to using account boosting to compete in Path of Exile 2 and Diablo 4's endgame, but said there was nothing to apologize for because everyone is doing it. The question and answer sesh kind of went like this. Yeah. Have you level boosted, had someone else play your accounts and or purchased gear resources for PoE 2 and Diablo 4? Nico Rex asked, to which Musk responded with a 100% emoji before adding that it is impossible to beat the players in Asia if you don't, as they do. So when kind of pressed a little bit further as to his honesty around this, he kind of rebuffed this by saying that he never intended or, claimed that his top accounts were only played by him. But, in conversations that he's had on podcasts like Joe Rogan and other places, he's consistently bragged about this elite gaming status and being a literal world-class gamer, according to him. So it's a little hard to take that at face value because he really does seem like he's intended and wanted to be seen as part of this community and as an elite player in this community. So
it's myth building, right? Like that's right. That's the big question. Part of the continuing struggle that a lot of very powerful people have, and he is the world's currently documented most wealthy dude. The struggle that a lot of powerful people have is, do I accumulate and exercise my powers behind the scene? Do I use my influence to become a public figure? And what we're seeing from critics of Musk pretty often is the idea that he has erred on the side of being a public figure more so than being, for instance, I'll be honest, a lot of the most powerful entities I have met don't have social media. Why would you? You know what I mean? Why would you open that door? So there is that, I guess, egoistic, maybe ego-driven struggle within oneself. And the thing is, I love that you're pointing out the conversations on the podcasting, because it reminds me of the old, what's the old narcissist edict? What is it? The narcissist prayer. That didn't happen. And if it did, it wasn't that bad, aka everyone does it. And if it was, then it's not a big deal. And if it is, it's not my fault. And if it was, I didn't mean it. And if I did, you deserved it. So, like, similar to the stages of grief, where we're seeing this play out in real time. And gosh, I hope, I mean, of all things, you guys, video games are supposed to be fun.
And I think that's the point, too, is of all things to be dishonest about, video games seems like such a low-stakes thing to risk your reputation on and your credibility on lying about. And I guess the question then becomes, if you're that insecure that you're going to lie about that, what else are you lying about?
Right, the implication.
Yeah, and I just want to not to throw him entirely under the bus here. I'm just kind of reporting what's being said. But his ex-wife or ex-partner, Grimes, the very interesting musician, artist, did kind of vouch for him on X, saying, "Just for my personal pride, I would like to state that the father of my children was the first American druid in Diablo to clear Abattoir of Zir and ended that season as best in the USA. He was also ranking in Polytopia and beat Felix himself at the game." Don't know who that guy is. "I did observe these things with my own eyes. There are other witnesses who can verify this. That is all." So, I mean, the guy's clearly no slouch at gaming, but it does seem like to get to the levels that he's purporting to have done on his own, it would seem, requires a little outside help and investment. And now he's more or less acknowledged that he's done that. So I don't know. Take that for what it's worth, y'all. And lest you think we are not going to mention the interesting hand signal that's being much debated that he did at the inauguration. We're going to get to that. Signal? Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm just teasing the discussion because now is not the time to fully get into that. Let's call it a salute. We're going to talk about that in this week's listener mail episode. And just to wrap this up real quick, guys, I don't want to do another story because I don't have enough time, I don't think, but I did find a story about some potential arsonists that were detained, that were arrested for trying to infiltrate the evacuation zones in the Pacific Palisades area of California, of Los Angeles, where these horrific fires took place. They actually had a fake fire truck and were dressed in fire gear and were apparently, it's unclear, there were others that were trying to do this in order to loot houses because these evacuation zones are off limits for anyone except fire personnel. And these folks were, caught doing this and have been arrested. And it is not indicated that they were intending to do arson, but one of the people that was detained, a man by the name of Dustin Nell, had previously been convicted for crimes in Oregon involving arson at golf courses. It was described as setting off an explosion and damaging water infrastructure, as well as, some of the activities at this golf course. I wanted to bring this up also because this is a pretty wild sounding story. We've been hearing a lot of wild sounding stories that are coming out of these fires. And we talked a lot when we discussed this last about how hard it is to parse out the real stories from the fake stories, the real images from the AI generated images. It's getting harder and harder. And I absolutely fell victim to this very thing. And a very helpful listener wrote in to set me straight. I'm just going to read this real quick. It's from a listener named David. "Hi, guys. I just started listening to your January 20th episode, and I had to stop it at the 25-minute mark because it was said that firefighters were using women's purses to carry water. This is absolutely false and part of the propaganda campaign against California and the firefighters there. The bags you see are collapsible buckets that are designed to carry water. That's their specific use and are absolutely not women's purses. Check on things like this before you blindly report things you see online. You can use this on air, David." And I wrote back to David telling me that he's absolutely correct and that we here on the show are not perfect and are just as susceptible to some of this kind of stuff as everyone else. And I very much apologize for reporting something like that was not true. It is a video of these firefighters using what do appear to be kind of large handled handbag type things, and the commentary and what I saw was reporting it as such, that they were women's handbags, and it was meant to be a ding against the preparedness of the Los Angeles County Fire Department, and that absolutely was not the case here. So I just want to openly apologize for getting that wrong and openly say that I will do better and strive to parse out some of this stuff, but also acknowledge how tricky it can be.
Yeah, well said. We appreciate you there, Dave, because one of the big takeaways from our conversation there previously was about exercising critical thought, and we've talked about it before. It's devilishly difficult to suss out, agendas, origin point, ulterior motivations with some things like we. Oh gosh, no. What else? We also mentioned, the way people might be fleeing from a home burning down, carrying just what they can grab, and they're
reported
called
as looters. That's
yeah.
right.
So this is, again, we're here with you. This is a collective. I sometimes refer to human existence as the world's longest non-consensual game of improv. So we're covering this, and one thing I really appreciated you pointing out to there in our previous exploration on Strange News program was, we are like the rest of the world exercising empathy. We're very concerned. We have friends, we have family, we have loved ones, just like everybody else out there in California fighting the fires.
That's right. Yeah, well said, Ben. And I know this ran a little long. I think we've got a lot on our minds today, and we've had a little bit of a break. So getting back together after a little bit of downtime, we've got a lot to say, and there's a lot going on in the world. So we are going to take a little break here and then come back with our last segment of Strange News for today's episode.
And we've returned. Guys, I'm going to start with a little quotation. It is long, but bear with me because I think it is worth bearing. Gentlemen, you remember a guy named Bernie Sanders, a.k.a. the senator from Vermont?
Yes, a.k.a. King of Mittens.
Sick mitten game. I was about to say the same thing. Iconic. Oh, remember the memes with that one with his cross-legged pose and his chair he brought from home?
I mean, he did some other stuff, sure. But this is not a quotation from Bernie about mittens, is it?
No, it is not.
All right.
I'm bringing you this quote because I had a moment sitting in my parents' basement while we were having some family time on MLK Day, and I happened to put on the inauguration of President Donald Trump, and I was struck by an image of a singular row of human beings that were sitting behind the president and immediately behind where everything was taking place, and saw that image. I thought back to some stuff that I'd heard from the senator from Vermont, and it kind of crystallized in a moment, and it has to do with everything we've been talking about on this episode so far. So I'm gonna read this. Here we go. This is Senator Sanders talking at the Brookings Institution, a think tank you should definitely look into. This is what he had to say. In 2015, quote, "We are moving rapidly away from our democratic heritage into an oligarchic form of society, where today we are experiencing a government of the billionaires, by the billionaires, and for the billionaires. Billionaire families are now able to spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to purchase the candidates of their choice. The billionaire class now owns the economy, and they're working day and night to make certain that they own the United States government. I know people are not comfortable when I say this. This is still the quote. But I want you to take a hard look at what's going on, take a deep breath, and you tell me whether or not we're looking at a democracy or whether we're looking at an oligarchy. When you have multiple single families, that's modified a little bit, that have more political power than the Democratic Party, than the Republican Party, families that can spend unlimited sums of money not only on campaigns but on think tanks, like the one that he's speaking to, and the media, I worry very, very much about the future of democracy in this country." Now, the reason why that quote was so prescient is because if you looked at that row of human beings standing behind a president who is being inaugurated, you saw $900 billion worth of money represented in four families.
Yeah.
$900 billion. Essentially in four individuals, but in the families, the family structures of those individuals. And that is not something that is uncommon for all presidents. In every inauguration, there are the power players, right? That's how you get a seat there at the inauguration. You spent either a lot of money or you got a lot of power or both.
Well, and in the previous Trump administration, a lot of these folks were distancing themselves. And it seems like that narrative has shifted wildly.
Well, yeah. And again, no matter how you feel about President Trump, no matter how you feel about any of the political stuff surrounding it, the understanding that those folks, the money, the real money, is just sitting there kind of basking in the glory of the power that, a presidential administration represents.
And kissing the ring.
Which is or presenting their rings to be kissed.
Also
There you
true.
go.
Thank you, Ben. That's right. That's right.
Part of it, because it's interesting. I love that we're bringing this up, Matt. One of the great tech giants from the U.S. who did not show up was Bill Gates. And I'm bringing that into our conversation here at the end of Strange News to just ask how much higher would that accretional total value have been if old Bill rolled through? You know what I mean?
What about Warren Buffett? He's not throwing his hat in the ring, has he?
Warren has made some very call him Warren. He's made some very interesting financial moves lately. From what I understand, he's sitting on a lot of cash, a lot of liquidity. This is unrelated to our conversation, other than the fact that people who read the Buffett tea leaves are pretty sure he's waiting to see what falls and how.
Yeah, well, I mean, and if he was there, it would have increased that $900 billion number by $146 billion, roughly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And again, with Bill Gates, I don't even know where who knows? Just add another 100 billion, let's say,
just
or whatever.
Between friends, you know what I mean? Just for the table.
But you would get over $1 trillion worth of power, because money, as we've talked about before, is a superpower, and you can use it, you can exercise it in all kinds of different ways. The reason why I'm bringing all this up because of this discussion today is because there was a little thing that was posted on PBS via AP News, written by James Keaton. It was posted on January 21st, 2025. And the title is, Billionaires' Wealth Soared in 2024. At least 5 trillionaires with a T expected in next decade, Anti-Poverty Group says. Okay, so one of the major things here, we just talked about $1.7 million as being a massive sum of money in 1919, and just how much money that was and how much power that gave you, 1.7 million. And then, over the course of our lives, we've seen that number, and it's joked about in the Austin Powers films, right? $1 billion. How a billion then became the crazy number that people would not get to. That's insane. That's volcano layer money.
Oh, I mean, the idea of a millionaire is quaint, these days.
And it's going
a starter home in some cities is $1 million, I mean.
Yeah, looking at you, Austin. But the crazy thing now is thinking that within 10 years, there could potentially be trillionaires, like real, true trillionaires, at least according to Oxfam International. All of these, organizations, the Brookings Institute, Oxfam International, there are things that are worth your time to look into, just so you have an understanding of the institution. Who formed it, why they formed it.
Ooh, and check out our earlier episodes on think tanks.
Yes, episodes on think tanks. So many episodes to go back to really ponder some of this stuff. But just to me, if you read through that article that I just mentioned, that you can find on PBS right now, it is astounding to imagine the Davos. Didn't we talk about Davos in Think Tank?
Yes.
Or was it? Yeah. That happens in Switzerland, where the most powerful, influential, rich human beings get together and just have ideas together.
Yeah, it's like it's like the first class version of TED Talks.
Yes.
Or actually, it's the private plane of TED Talks. Oh gosh, yeah, we have an episode on that.
It's a Bohemian Grove type vibe. I mean, it really is where the big players go to have kind of closed door, negotiations.
Less giant owl statues. But
I would
yes.
say Bohemian Grove is kind of JV to the varsity
100%.
of Davos.
Davos is the big dogs.
Yeah, Davos is to our earlier point. And I love how you're sewing this together, Matt. Davos is where you're going to see those folks who have made the decision not to be a public figure, but rather to acquire further power behind the scenes. And they're saying what they think they're going to make the world a better place, but for whom?
Yeah. Well, then who knows? But I don't have enough wisdom to sit here and say, well, these billionaire guys are all bad. But I do know that it is concentrated power. And to watch and they are guys, these 4 guys, to watch them stand there as the, proceedings were occurring, all the presidential stuff, and just to kind of examine their eyes a little bit, it did give me pause. It made me wonder what was brewing, because it is actual actionable power that then they are potentially wielding.
And what is their connection? Is it very, high stakes drama like you would see on prestige television, like Game of Thrones or something like that? I love that you're pointing this out, and I hate to say it, guys. This is not devil's advocate. I'm not doing a Pacino move here, but I will point out that no matter who you are, it gets super awkward when you have to stand there and watch a thing for a long time and there's a camera on you.
Oh yeah.
I'm aware of that, but I do have to back you up there, Matt, on the haunting question, right? For any of these things, in the absence of transparency, speculation only thrives. What do these guys talk about, right? What's their interaction like? What brings them to the same physical location, which is a huge security risk as well?
Well, yeah, and you just have to hope that those discussions aren't based on further accumulation of wealth for themselves, and there is some kind of bigger picture. We can make this world a better place, and it's not self-serving. You hope in your heart, but man, I don't know. I'm not feeling a lot of that recently in the world.
It's uncapped. So there's just no way when you get past a certain point of wealth, you're basically above the law and you can do and say just about anything you want. I mean, we've just seen it at a certain level of wealth. It's really hard to go after these folks as individuals or as, their corporations, which also have all this massive political contribution power now because of Citizens United.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's also, I got to shout it out, the Monopoly experiment, you guys. The Monopoly experiment is a microcosmic examination of why we are so concerned. Check out what was that episode? Does being wealthy make you a bad person? We talk at length about, it's fascinating. Go to your platform, your browser of choice, and check out the Monopoly experiment, Wealthy, and you will have a harrowing look at why we are so concerned. But yeah, I'm with you, man. Maybe optimism. What if they get together and they just talk about like how the Atlanta Falcons never win, or cooking tips for crock pots?
Maybe. I
don't think they do.
I just want to stress this. Sitting here as I speak into this microphone, I do not see those individuals as bad people or good people. I see those guys as people with tremendous potential. And it's like they get to decide what they do with that power they have. And I know they'll never hear this, but dang, I don't know. As a whole of humanity, if we could somehow just send our psychic energy to the billionaires and be like, let's do some cool stuff that's not about profit anymore.
Dude, money is a religion. It's the dominant religion of this age. I'm not going to stop saying that. And I love, if you could do anything, then how do you choose what you want to do? It's the bubble of normalcy, right? Because these people have roughly the same factory equipment as any other human being, right? So maybe they suffer from the controversy of Dunbar's number. Imperfect science, but pretty interesting. Yeah, I'm just thinking what if we see these stats all the time, dude. People will say, look, you make X billion dollars, right? Even if you don't do anything, just your interest, therefore, will be millions of dollars. What if you just took that, adjusting for inflation, meaning that you will never lose money? What if you just put that extra stuff into things like sanitation, literacy, infrastructure, all the boring, beat me here, Dylan, all the boring that makes civilization possible? Why are you not doing that?
That doesn't prop up a single philosophy, a single culture, a single country, a single anything. Stuff that helps human beings proliferate in a really healthy and beautiful way.
Can I read a quick quote? I think I maybe have mentioned this before. It might have been about something else, but there's this clip making the rounds of the musician Frank Zappa from an interview that he did. I think it was on Crossfire in the 80s, the late 80s, when he was against President Ronald Reagan's policy. He actually testified about censorship at the Parents Music Resource Center Senate hearings, 1985. But he just had this to say on this segment. The biggest threat to America today is not communism. It's moving America toward a fascist theocracy. And everything that's happened during the Reagan administration is steering us right down that pipe. When you have a government that prefers a certain moral code derived from a certain religion, that moral code turns into legislation to suit one certain religious point of view. And if that code happens to be very, very, very far right wing, almost Attila the Hun type stuff can happen. And I just think, in this case, religion or theocracy could also just be like money. That is a religion, and just that is the primary mover and the primary motivator for these billionaires that are now in power. And it just kind of throws a lot of other moral decisions and ideas about what's right and wrong for regular people kind of out the window.
Well, yeah, and you can take any dogmatic belief and stretch it all the way out to the edge, and it can become terrifying for everybody, right?
Sure.
Doesn't matter if it's right, left, center, anything. It can become terrifying for everybody else that doesn't view the world in that way.
Self-justification is a hell of a drug, and people do it in your own environment all the time, right? Everybody sees themselves as the main character, the good guy. Therefore, anybody who is not immediately like worshiping at that ideology becomes treated like an enemy.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, and somebody who's so entrenched in that kind of thing can see everybody as an enemy. And then that's how you get to the demagogue stuff. So it's horrifying in a lot of ways. But I want to point out one last thing I noticed at the inauguration that I think is a cool little lesson for everybody. When I tuned in, it happened to be right at the tail end of when President Trump was speaking, and they introduced Carrie Underwood, who is a singer, a country singer who's coming out to sing a song. And she was going to sing America the Beautiful. And she was flanked by a military officer who was going to be a part of a choir that was singing America the Beautiful with her. And there's a backing track that is supposed to begin playing. But the tech side could not get the backing track to play. Carrie just stood there a bit awkwardly with the microphone waiting, for the track to play so that she could begin singing, and just kept waiting and nothing happened. Then all of a sudden, a tiny snippet of the song, a minute into the song, began playing over the loudspeakers and then shut off and then started playing again and then stopped. And everybody's looking around awkwardly, just like, what do we do in this moment? And they're all just human beings standing quietly in that rotunda together in silence as the murmurations start to, the tiny talking begins. Everyone's looking around. And finally, a producer walks up to Carrie and just says, hey, or something akin to, the track's not working. And you can't hear that, but you see the person who's got, a headset walk up to her with a clipboard and be like, I don't know. And she goes, all right, y'all, you know the words. And she just begins singing a cappella. And it is a beautiful song about a country that we're all a part of. And at least, on this recording. And it was actually a really nice moment because the humanity of everybody in that room was there, because everybody was singing. Everybody was singing together. And nobody was different from one another in that moment. And I know this is weird, and I'm sorry. It's all like,
I don't think
America,
it's weird.
yeah.
I think it's cool.
I do think we all want the best for this country and want to be united. And I don't think any of us on this podcast are looking for division. That is the last thing that we want.
But at the heart of it, it's humanity. That's what I saw, right? Yeah. So it wasn't actually, it was about a country. It was a song about a country. It was celebrating the president of, the country with the most powerful navy or whatever. But at the heart of it, it was human beings together celebrating humanity. And it was kind of beautiful. And no matter how you feel about any of that stuff, I would just say there's something to that we can all learn from.
And we can all aspire to participate within, very well said, Matt, beautifully put. This is, again, the secret is that there are a lot of people who have a lot of plans, but if you get down to it, nobody's really in charge. That's the craziest part. People are hopefully working together. And we, in that spirit, hope that you will work with us. You will join us and Gosh, dare I say it, Matt, sing along with us in these moments. There are several ways to do so. Please reach out and contact us. Reach out and touch faith. Again, as we said at the top, we are here with you in this long, non-consensual improv game called life. You can find us on email. Just wrote a couple of, had a great correspondence earlier today. You can call us on the telephone. We're excited to hear from you. You can also reach us on the internets, so long as the internet doesn't go full dead internet theory.
That's right. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist on the usual social media platforms of note, including YouTube, where we have video content galore for your perusing enjoyment, X, FKA Twitter, and Facebook, where we have our Facebook group. Here's where it gets crazy. On Instagram, and for the meantime, TikTok. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff Show. We're also human people, the three of us, and you can find us that way too. I'm on Instagram at HowNowNoelBrown. Mr. Ben Bolin.
No comment, assuming humanity. You can find me at Ben Bullen on Instagram. You can, of course, if you have the right scrying mirror or a Palantir, always just knock thrice if you know the code, and I'll drop by. Matt, I want to shout you out for a video that was posted recently on social media pertaining to some of our future activities in Brooklyn.
Oh, yes. Why not check out On Air Fest? It's happening this February in Brooklyn, New York. Specifically, we are doing a live show at National Sawdust on February 19th. So if you want to come hang with us in Brooklyn, why not do that? Yeah, just check it out. Make your way over there to National Sawdust. It's an awesome venue, and we're going to do some cool stuff about conspiracies of sound.
Indeed.
Ooh. Hey, if you want to call us, our number is 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, you've got 3 minutes. Say whatever you'd like. Please give yourself a cool nickname and let us know if we can use your name and message within that message. If you got more to say than can fit in a 3-minute voicemail, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are.
Before we get to the email, we are the people who are excited to tell you about some of the stories we didn't get to, including China's artificial sun. Shout out to the experimental advanced superconducting tokamak, which just broke a milestone in fusion energy research. Oh my gosh, if you know anything about nuclear energy, please write to us. Please give us the skinny on whether this is good news, terrible news, or amazing news. We spent a lot of time on pardons and commutations today. We can't wait to hear your opinion on that. Write to us. Give us the links. Give us the photographs. Send us pictures of your favorite shadow monsters or your favorite pets. We can't wait to read it and be well aware sometimes the void writes back. How can you prove that to yourself? There's only one way. Join us out here in the dark. Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.